Spend a few minutes with you all and talk to you a little bit about what's going on at the state level to grow and improve jobs in Washington State. And I just want to acknowledge Dave. You've got a real gem here in David Kleitch. He's not only does a lot of work, obviously, in the community, but he's also the incoming board chair of the Washington Economic Development Association, which is a super important umbrella organization that tries to bring together all of us in the state that are selling and marketing Washington State as part of what we do. And so I really appreciate the fact that David not only does his job here locally and does it well, but makes time to get involved in the bigger picture of what's going on around the state. So I appreciate that, David. And so I have way more information here than I could share with you in 24 minutes, and I've gotten a message about the punctuality, and I actually would like to take the time to answer questions. So these slides I've put on this laptop and will be available. I assume we can find a way to make them available to anybody that's interested later, because I'm just going to fly through and you can squint your eyes and just listen to the story I tell while I show you some things. And then I'm going to do my best to stop at least 5 to 10 minutes before the end of the meeting to have a dialogue about what you all are seeing and how what I'm saying makes sense or doesn't make sense given your perspective on things. So the broad agenda was a quick flyby on an update on what's going on in the state economy, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I try to give you a sense of what things look like from our view. I want to spend a little time talking about competitiveness because this is a topic that comes up a lot right now, and it's very germane to our ability to grow and improve jobs, and we've done some recent analysis looking into this, so I want to share that with you. And then really talk about what is the state doing to grow and improve jobs. And I find it most useful to talk about that in a chronological framework. So what are the things we're doing that are likely to impact jobs in the next 12 months, in the sort of 1 to 3 year time frame, which I'll call the medium term somewhat arbitrarily, and then beyond 3 years. And so that's where we're heading. I want to start with a little bit of a commercial for the Department of Commerce. Dave talked a little bit about our mission, which is to grow and improve jobs. I spent a lot of time, I took this job a little over 2 years ago and spent a lot of time that summer of 2009 traveling around the state with one question. With respect to growing and improving jobs, what can the state government do to make an impact? And I got a lot of feedback on that question, and it really boiled down into these 8 priority areas. We separate them into what we call global priorities, global not in the sense of international, but in the sense of those 4 issues across the top we think impact every employer in the state, no matter what industry you're in, whether you're a small business or a large enterprise. And so that's the 4 global priorities you see there, and then we have 4 what we call more specific priorities. Let me read them off if they're hard to see. So the global ones: competitiveness, education and workforce training, efficient and effective regulation, and infrastructure investment. And then the 4 specific priorities, which subset the mission in one way or another, are community capacity, rural focus, a focus on the biggest sectors, and a small business focus. So in each of those areas, we have tried to begin to drill down and say, what can we do as a state, as an agency, and then as a state government to impact these areas? And there's a website listed at the bottom of the slide, commerce.wa.gov, where we have a 6 to 8 page strategic plan that gives you the next level down on each of these priorities. So if you're interested, I encourage you to go take a look at that, and certainly send me mail with any feedback you have. But that's kind of at a high level what we're doing as an agency. And we have key metrics that we're looking at to see how we're doing around growth in jobs, but also the quality of the jobs. And quality largely is measured by the wage levels of those jobs. And we're tracking those things really relative mostly to other states because we all operate inside the United States and the sort of policy environment we have here. So how are we doing as a state competing against other states on those key metrics? So that's kind of an overview. On the economy, well, I'm just going to breeze through this. The stock market is usually a pretty good forward-looking view of how things are going to go with the economy. While it's bounced around some lately, it's largely up quite a bit from its bottom in early 2009, I think it was, and continues to be positive. So while it moves around a lot, and who knows what the future looks like, I usually look at that as the best knowledge, wisdom of the crowd, essentially, on where we're heading overall. The GDP, we don't get quarterly GDP numbers for the state, so we have to look at the national numbers. And Essentially, you can see the shaded area where we went into recession and sort of officially out of recession late in 2009. We've been in positive territory in terms of growth for 7 quarters, but of course not what we all know we need. And while we might be technically out of the recession, I don't think any of us feel like we're out of the recession. But that's what the growth in the economy looks like over the last 7 quarters. Then we get to employment, which is a lot more of what my agency thinks about. And this is showing you total employment in Washington State, excluding farm workers and military and sole proprietors. And you can see that you're looking at about 8 years of data there, quarterly data. We peaked at just under 3 million people employed in the state in late 2008. At the bottom, we had lost just over 200,000 jobs, and we've gained back only about 30,000 of those jobs to date. And of course, the state's population continues to grow, so we need to not only get back to where we were, but we need to go past that to get to a healthy place. So we've got a lot of work to do. This just shows you a view around the state of the unemployment rate in every county in the state. Employment Security will caution you that these numbers have a fairly high degree of variability because the sample size can be pretty small in some counties. But it gives you a general sense that while the overall state unemployment rate is 9.1%, I think it is now, if you look in the southwest and the northeast parts of the state, there you see real struggling going on in those parts of the states particularly. And then if you look, there are some pockets of relative strength. Somebody was pointing out to me just this morning, Whitman County at 5.5% looks pretty good. The Tri-Cities in general has weathered the recession pretty well, given the Hanford investments and more people retiring in that part of the state. So that's by county. This is a real eye chart, but what this is looking at is our job growth rates as a state compared to a handful of 8 to 10 other states that we think are particularly competitive states to us, and how we're doing. And the middle line is 0. So we were all losing jobs in the middle of that graph in 2008 and 2009, and we started gaining again. But as you can see, the shaded one is Washington State. While we were kind of top of the pack, before the recession, we fell to the middle of the pack during the recession, and we're kind of remaining in the middle of the pack as we come out of the recession, which is concerning to me. This shows growth in jobs by low, medium, and high wage jobs. So we take the industry codes and we break them crudely into low wage, high wage, and medium wage jobs. And what this chart tells you is that the bulk of our job losses in the recession have come in the middle wage jobs, which is where a lot of those family wage jobs are that really underpin our economy and our society. So that's also concerning. If you look into the specific industries where we've lost jobs, eye chart here, the short answer is that not a surprise. In the construction industries, the building industries, and the financial services around that, like mortgage brokers and financial services around home ownership, have really been the places where we've lost the most jobs from our base. And then lastly, this is a chart of home prices, the Case-Shiller Home Price Index, and we have double dipped in terms of home prices. They're now falling again. The federal government propped up home buying for a while, then they took those incentives away, and so the market is resuming its correction. And I've been thinking a lot lately about why is Washington State lagging the rest of the country now? Our unemployment rate's higher than the national unemployment rate now. Why is that? A lot of people thought we would be positioned to lead out of the recession, and we don't seem to be, at least on the employment front. And the only answer I've got right now, or the biggest one, is that we've had more of a housing bubble here than lots of other parts of the country, and we've got to clear that housing bubble somehow, because it both impacts obviously the industries around that, but also people won't spend when they don't know what their net worth is, and a house is at the center of most people's net worth. And so until we get to reality with respect to home prices, I think people aren't going to be spending at the levels they normally do, and our economy is going to struggle. So I think that's our single biggest challenge right now with respect to the overall economy. The competitiveness thing, I'm watching the clock, so this is going to be fast, but there are all kinds of studies that come out all the time ranking the states in competitiveness. And what you're seeing here is just the ones that have come out in the last year. And what you can see is that we come out everywhere from number 2 to number 35, depending on the study. And so that's kind of maddening to me, and I'm like, well, what does that mean, and what's really the truth underneath all of these? And so we had McKinsey actually looked into all of these and really recommended the ones that are bolded there for as legitimate studies that had solid methodologies and were probably telling the truth. And so we spent some time deconstructing those studies. The rankings, of course, depend, as you might imagine, on a lot of things. What's measured, how it's weighted, et cetera, et cetera. This is a total Rube Goldberg eye chart thing, but if you really, the answer, some of the answer to this is that the economy is a big, complicated thing, right? And these are all parts of, if you're thinking about your economic performance, all of these parts are important at some level. And what happens is different studies look at different parts of this, and some of them look only at cost, and some of them try to look at cost and quality. And so depending on what you pick and how much your focus is on cost or quality, you get different answers. So what's, I think, incumbent on us is to try to sift through it and say, what can we say about the entire Washington economy based on the collection of all these studies? And, here's a summary of what we've been able to glean from all of these studies in terms of our state's competitiveness. First of all, our strengths. In the private economy, our employment growth over the last 10 years has been pretty strong. Per capita personal income, we're in the top 10 in the country based on one of these studies. Median household income is pretty strong. Foreign exports are strong. Manufacturing value added, we're the #1 state in the country for manufacturing value add, largely thanks to the aerospace industry, but other industries as well. In innovation and technology, we are second in the country in patents per 10,000 employees and #1 in growth in patents, I think, over the last 5 to 10 years. In other inputs, electricity really pops to the top. We have the lowest industrial electricity rates in the country, I believe, either the lowest or the next lowest. That's a big advantage. In capital, our venture capital economy is pretty strong here. And our broadband infrastructure, I think it's somewhat embarrassing to be 15th, but it is in the top half of the states. And so I guess in that sense, you can say it's a relative strength. Workforce, scientists and engineers, we're second in the country in scientists and engineers per capita. High-tech jobs, we rank very well. Educational attainment in our workforce, we rank 11th. Education, WSU and UW are both well-regarded research universities. In the regulatory and law area, we get strong marks from Forbes on regulatory environment and state management. They kind of lump together those two things, which are two pretty different things if you ask me. But as a state, we manage our fiscal affairs relatively responsibly, and so I think that counts a lot with Forbes, and it's why we score relatively well there. And then state and local taxes per $1,000 of personal income, we're 21st, so we're kind of in the middle of the pack. And quality of life, state parks and recreation ranked well in the state health index. We were 11th overall. So those are strengths. What about places where we can improve, weaknesses? In the private economy, our unemployment rate, I mentioned earlier, is higher than the national average now. And there's something called traded employment in strong clusters. That's a lot of gobbledygook that says, in industries where we have, a strength like aerospace, the amount of employment associated with exporting products out of the state is actually relatively weak, according to Michael Porter, who's a Harvard Business School professor that's looked at a bunch of states. I have to admit, I don't understand. This doesn't match my intuition, so I need to dig more into why that's true. In innovation and technology, our e-government ranking is pretty low. We haven't really implemented e-government stuff as much as other parts of the country. And commercialization of IP and patents is relatively weak for us. In capital, foreign direct investment is not very strong. We hear a lot about small business credit access and the value of debt for startups as issues for the state. And education, 4th grade reading, high school graduation rates, and engineering and science degrees are all relative weaknesses for the state. In regulation and law, I hear all the time about the regulatory, how inefficient our regulation is in the state. In workforce, our unemployment insurance system and workers' compensation systems are not highly ranked relative to other states. And we noted that retiring aerospace workers is a real challenge for us. Boeing, I think, has a huge percentage of their workforce retirement eligible in the next 5 to 10 years, and we need to be gearing up to address that. In infrastructure, interstate miles in poor condition. urban roadway travel times in the Seattle-Everett-Tacoma corridor, extending broadband to underserved areas, and local infrastructure financing tools are all issues, and quality of life, housing affordability in the Seattle area ranked 204th out of 225 areas studied. So if you net it out, and it's always challenging to net out so many different things, but we believe that growing jobs and income and a high-wage, high-skilled workforce is a strength of the state, strong technology and innovation performance, globally competitive companies, and low-cost power. Those are all strengths. And education, transportation infrastructure, and support for key sectors like aerospace are all key challenges for us. So that was our effort to try to net all this out. I think equally important to the top-down look is the bottoms-up view from around the state about where we're winning and losing in the competition with other states and parts of the world and why. So, I've been reaching out to the counties levels to say, please bring me the situations where we're losing and let me surface those to the legislature to sort of provide the powerful stories that can complement the sort of analytical part around competitiveness. Okay, 7 minutes. So I think what I'm going to do is fly through the jobs. Short term, what are we doing about jobs? The capital budget for the state government is a big thing. The Recovery Act continues to be spent, actually. That money is not fully spent by a long shot. And business climate reform. This is showing you our transportation budget. We've had the good fortune of being at the peak of a transportation investment cycle in the state, right as that industry is hungry for work. So we've been getting great prices on a lot of our transportation projects. That will be ending in another couple of years. The state capital budget just got passed. It will produce OFM, thanks to the Office of Financial Management, around 30,000 jobs in the next biennium. And then on the Recovery Act, recovery.wa.gov is a site I encourage you to go take a look at if you want to see exactly where Recovery Act money is being spent in Washington State and how it's going. The short summary is around $8 billion came to Washington State, and the best estimate of jobs created or saved is around 11,000. On the business climate, the legislature did pass a workers' comp reform package over the weekend, and I think it will improve the competitiveness of our workers' compensation system. Earlier in the session, there was also reform made to the unemployment insurance system, which will save businesses collectively around $300 million in the coming year over what they would have had to pay otherwise. So I do think the legislature and the governor, under the governor's leadership, made some significant progress on some key business climate issues. In the medium term, there's a range of investments that are being made to impact jobs, one of which is, you see the ADO word, that's Associate Development Organizations. That's the county-level folks that Dave was talking about, like the Snohomish Economic Alliance. The state does invest about $6 to $7 million in those county organizations to do locally based job creation. A whole bunch of other things that I don't have time to go into, but would be happy to answer questions about them or emails later. And then in the long term, I think you can point to the early learning and K-12 investments we make. There is an Economic Development Commission that the state has. I don't know how many people are aware of that, but that group has got legislators and private sector and government agencies on it, and it's trying to develop a longer-term strategy for the states around economic development. And then our Commerce view is that we also ought to be identifying what are the broad cross-economy trends, long-term trends that we think stand to disproportionately benefit Washington State over time. And I think the more we can gain consensus on what those trends are and align our public policy and our public investment behind those trends, I think that's an opportunity over the long term to really grow and improve jobs in the state. And our list in Commerce of what those three of those trends would be are the rise of the Asia-Pacific region and the tremendous opportunity to sell products and services to that part of the world as it gains more economic power and starts growing its middle classes. The clean energy transition, and the increasing role of software across industries in the economy. And I know that being a Microsoft guy, the phrase, when all you've got's a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail might come to mind. But really, in conversation with the aerospace industry, manufacturing, agriculture, life sciences, entertainment, all these industries are seeing more and more digital content be part of their business. And we have the largest software skill base in the world in this region. If we can build that skill base and point it at other industries, I think that's a chance to drive a lot of growth for the state. So with that, I'm going to stop. I only left us about 3 or 4 minutes for Q&A.
Take 5, yeah.
Okay, but but that really is it. I mean, I have a slide here on the Economic Development Commission strategy, and the three pillars to it. But that's really what I had to say. So, yeah, question, and I'll start here and then there and there. Yes, sir.
Yes, you mentioned the fact that you thought that the housing market is having a significant drag on the economy in the state, which I agree with. As an attorney, I do a lot of short sale negotiation with lenders trying to get short sale properties sold. And one of the things I've observed is that the banks seem to be accepting write-offs on these things in preference to doing foreclosures for a variety of reasons. And it's created a mentality in the marketplace where a lot of the buyers out there basically have a bottom feeder mentality. And I saw a report the other day that indicated that over 30% of the mortgage properties in the state are underwater. And I'm just wondering, what, if anything, do you see the state doing at the state level to address any of that?
Yep. Did everybody hear the question? So, okay. I think that's exactly right, and I think that the one thing that I can point to specifically is a bill did pass in this session that actually put Commerce in charge of facilitating mediation between mortgage holders and banks to avoid foreclosure at the time and expense of foreclosure. So we already had a program that coordinated a bunch of dispute resolution centers. So we're going to be distributing money to allow mediated settlements between mortgage holders and their banks. And I think that's an effort to try to clear these things up faster. Beyond that, we've been trying to figure out what else could we do to help the building industry get back to work while that clears. And we do have one idea, which is we have some federal money to look at access to credit for small businesses. And we're talking about creating a fund that would allow builders to come borrow money to buy homes that need renovation, renovate them, and while they're doing that, do a complete energy retrofit so that they've upgraded the energy efficiency of the home, and then sell the home, make their money and come back again. So we've seen a couple of builders doing that in this area actually successfully. We'd like to see if we could scale that up as a way to go get the energy efficiency that we know is in the existing building stock and give the building industry some work to do. So those are two, but I'm interested in any ideas that people might have. It's a big issue. Yes, sir.
You talked a lot about jobs. Obviously, an unemployment number tends to be a little bit of a political football backwards and forwards. And certainly we hear a lot about the unemployment number, but we don't really hear a lot about the underemployed, the non-employed, the migrant workers. What numbers do you folks use in your department when you talk about this? Do you put the political number aside and say, well, it's not 9%, it's really more like 14%?
Well, I don't, because it doesn't, in a way, I don't think it would change a lot of what I would do, because 9 is already unacceptably high. So, I haven't thought about whether if I broaden my view to looking at underemployed, would I do anything differently than I'm doing now. But the reason I haven't paid a lot of attention to underemployed, even though I know it's out there, is because I've already got a big problem that, even if you just take the official number.
But from dealing with the politicians down there,
yeah.
Wouldn't they kind of react more urgently if you used a figure like, well, the actual figure, guys, is more like 14%, it's not 9%. I'm just wondering a more realistic approach to that. And also the people have just given up looking as well.
Yep. No, I fully accept that 9% is probably not accurately reflecting all the people that would like to be working. It's a good question about, I haven't detected a lack of urgency around the unemployment that we already have, but I don't know. Maybe I should be using a higher number. It's a good point. Yes, sir, in the back.
I didn't see anything in your list about labor laws and labor relations. And yet the National Labor Relations Board is telling the whole world that South Carolina is a better place to take manufacturing jobs. Does our administration have any program for improving labor relations and labor laws in Washington?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that I think the governor is very aware of what's going on right now with the NLRB ruling and its impact on our situation with Boeing. So I think the consistent feedback she gets from both Boeing and the unions is don't get in the middle of our relationship. And that being said, I think the governor is certainly in a position to play an influential role on facilitating that relationship privately. So I think publicly, I think that she needs to. I think what she would say is publicly, I need to stay out of it, and I need to do the work I can privately, and I think that's what she's doing. And then if you look at something like the workers' comp issue, I mean that's there's labor industry dynamics behind that. And so those tensions are there, but I think you did see that at the end of the day, the legislature did, reform the workers' comp system. So I think that was acknowledging that we're in unprecedentedly tough times, and we need to do everything we can to help employers be able to hire people.
We've got time for one more, Roger.
Okay, one last question, or look at that, perfect. Thank you very much.